Have you ever had your heart broken just completely out of nowhere, or maybe had your car engine violently explode while you were just driving down the highway, and you immediately thought to yourself, like, I knew this was going to happen?
Oh, yeah. Every time.
Right. You look back at the past few weeks and suddenly, all the signs just seem incredibly obvious. But what if I told you that your brain is actually actively lying to you?
It's a wild thought.
It is. What if your memory is aggressively rewriting its own history just to protect you from the terrifying randomness of the universe?
I mean, it is honestly one of the most unsettling things to realize about human cognition because
Yeah,
we tend to treat our memories like unalterable security camera footage.
exactly. Yeah.
You assume that when an event happens, your eyes and ears just capture the raw data and it gets permanently filed away on a hard drive somewhere in your head.
Like an MP4 file.
Right, exactly. But in reality, your mental security camera is constantly being edited by this very paranoid director who's just trying to make sense of whatever is happening in the present moment.
Which is so fascinating. And we are diving into that exact phenomenon today in this deep dive, but through a really unexpected lens. So we have this incredible set of notes from Dave Hartzell.
Yes.
And Dave is a master HVAC technician out in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, with 47 years of experience in the trade.
47 years, that's a lot of broken air
A
conditioners.
massive amount. Over nearly 5 decades, he has diagnosed so many failing AC units. But what he is actually diagnosing in these notes, the real mission of our deep dive today, is the profound gap between what we remember knowing and what we actually knew before a failure happens.
Which is just a brilliant framing because, think about it, an HVAC technician arrives at exactly the moment a homeowner's reality is just fractured.
Yeah.
A sudden, usually very expensive failure has occurred, and the homeowner's brain is desperately trying to establish a narrative of how it happened.
They need a story.
Right. And Dave's 47 years of these post-failure conversations, they give us an absolute masterclass in this foundational psychological concept known as hindsight bias.
Okay, so let's ground this in a specific story Dave tells in his notes about a service call in Dover.
Oh, this is a great one.
So it's the middle of July, scorching hot as July is, and this woman's AC compressor completely fails.
The worst time for it to happen.
Literally the worst.
Yeah.
So Dave goes out, he runs his diagnostics, and determines the compressor is just dead. It has to be condemned. And the moment he delivers this news to the homeowner, her immediate response is that she, quote, knew all along it was going to die this summer.
She was absolutely convinced of it. She believed the machine had been communicating its impending death to her since the spring.
And what I love is how Dave handles this. He doesn't dismiss her, right?
Yeah.
He just gently asks what exactly the unit had been telling her all those months ago.
Right.
So she searches her memory, and the absolute best she can come up with is that the air conditioner had been making a different sound. Not a grinding sound or, a screeching sound.
Just different.
Just different.
Yeah.
And this is the perfect entry point into the cognitive mechanics of what her brain is actually doing in that sweltering driveway.
Yeah.
To really understand the neurological sleight of hand happening here, we have to look back at this landmark study conducted in 1975 by Baruch Fischhoff.
Okay.
It was published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology.
Yeah.
And Fischhoff, he was working out of Hebrew University, and he was trying to prove a very specific thesis, which is hindsight is not equal to foresight.
Which, that sounds intuitive, right? But the way our brains actually process that difference is anything but.
Right, exactly. So Fischhoff designs this experiment. He gives his subjects a historical text to read about a 19th century war between the British and the Gurkhas in Nepal.
Okay, so an obscure historical conflict. Exactly. After reading the background of the conflict, the subjects are asked to estimate the statistical probability of various possible outcomes to that war. Like, who wins? Is there a stalemate? What happens?
But he splits the group, right?
Yeah.
Because some subjects are just guessing based on the tension in the text they just read, and others are explicitly told the actual historical outcome before they even make their estimates.
Yes. And the results were staggering. The subjects who possessed the answer key, the ones who knew how the war actually ended, they rated that specific outcome as having been vastly more probable from the beginning than the blind group did.
Which, makes sense on the surface. If you know the British won, you're going to say, well, obviously the British were going to win. But Fischhoff took it a step further, didn't he?
He really did. He explicitly instructed the group with the answer key to ignore what they knew.
Wow.
He told them, to make their estimates as if they were entirely in the dark, just like the other group, to reconstruct a state of pure uncertainty, and they completely failed.
They just couldn't do it.
They simply could not do it. Knowing the outcome made that outcome look entirely inevitable in retrospect.
It's as if the brain treats uncertainty as a bug rather than a feature. The moment you learn an outcome, your brain instantly updates its semantic network. It prunes away all the alternative possibilities just to save cognitive space.
Yes.
Which I guess is efficient for survival,
Yeah,
but it completely destroys the historical record of your own past uncertainty.
that's exactly it. And that cognitive pruning is what Fischhoff termed creeping determinism.
Creeping determinism. I love that phrase.
It's a great term, because once the future arrives, it looks like the absolutely only future that could have possibly arrived. The human mind loses its structural ability to look backward and see the other futures that were, equally live, equally possible, just days or hours before.
Okay, let's unpack this with a sort of analogy. It's like watching a complex whodunit mystery movie for the second time.
Okay, yeah.
During your first viewing, you have no idea who the killer is. Every character is a suspect. The world is full of branching possibilities. But on the second viewing, you already know it's the butler.
Right, because you have the answer key.
Exactly. So suddenly, every lingering camera shot on the butler, every slight hesitation in his dialogue, it looks like a glaring, neon-flashing clue. But the first time you watched it, it was just background scenery. Your memory is actively editing the footage to make the butler look guilty from scene one.
And that active editing is precisely what is happening in the Dover customer's brain. Human memory does not passively pull up a file. Every time a memory is retrieved, it is reconstructed using the materials of the present moment.
So her present moment is a broken AC.
Right. After the compressor fails in July, every quiet click, every odd hum from the previous spring is retrieved and rebuilt into a glaring warning sign. Before the compressor failed, those exact same sounds were just the background noise of a system that was running completely normally.
But Dave makes a very deliberate point in his notes to say that the customer in Dover was not making this up, right? Like she wasn't lying to him or just trying to sound smart.
No, not at all. She really did remember a different sound from the spring. I mean, air conditioning units are massive mechanical beasts. They make noises.
Right.
Bearings wear, belts shift, metal expands and contracts. Some of those sounds, from a purely mechanical standpoint, probably did correlate with the internal wear that eventually caused the failure in July.
But in the spring, those sounds were just ambient noise. They were buried in the acoustic environment of a living, breathing house.
Exactly. They lacked the distinctness required for action. Think about the sheer volume of sensory data your brain filters out every single day.
Oh, it's overwhelming.
Right. The hum of the refrigerator, the settling of the floorboards, distant traffic, your brain habituates to all of it. So she heard the AC kick on in the spring, her brain filed it under normal house noises, and she went right back to her day. It was the catastrophic failure of the compressor in July that retroactively promoted those ambient sounds into a highly specific warning sign.
Retroactively promoted. And the mind just takes the ambient sound in the spring and the dead compressor in July and draws this thick, solid line of causation between the two.
Yes.
Then it walks backward along that timeline and decides the sound was an active predictor.
A predictor she supposedly should have paid attention to.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting because I want to challenge this idea for a second. Let me push back.
Go for it.
If she physically heard a different sound in the spring, and that sound mechanically preceded the failure of the compressor, isn't that genuine foresight? Like, the machine made a noise and then it broke. Why are we saying nobody could have known, or that this is a trick of the memory?
It's a great question, and it comes down to the signal-to-noise ratio. The distinction lies entirely in the specificity of the premonition at the time it occurred. Compressors do not give a clear, single, undeniable signal before they die. They emit what Dave refers to as a fuzz of signals.
A fuzz of signals, meaning like a chaotic mix of normal operation and minute degradation.
Exactly. Within that fuzz, some signals are very early indicators of pre-failure. Some are just standard mechanical aging that won't cause a problem for another 5 years, and some are absolutely nothing at all, just a weird harmonic vibration on a Tuesday.
Right.
The unit failed within its normal failure probability envelope for a piece of equipment of its age. The warning she thought she had was entirely unactionable in the spring because it was indistinguishable from the fuzz. It only gained its significance in hindsight after the July failure pulled it out of the background noise.
So it converted a low-grade ambient unease into a highly specific premonition, which is fascinating, but also, I think, a little dangerous.
Definitely.
Because when we talk about this bragging register of the bias, the I knew it all along version,
Yep.
it feels harmless. It's just a trick of the mind to rewrite history so you look a bit more prophetic. It doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
But there is a much darker side to creeping determinism when it turns inward.
Yeah, this is where the psychology gets very heavy. Gave separates hindsight bias into two distinct emotional registers in his notes. There's the bragging version, which is protective, like you said, but then there's the self-punishing version, the I should have known version.
Oh, man. The customer who decides they were completely negligent for not acting earlier?
Yes. The homeowner who berates themselves for not having the system inspected in the fall. The customer who is visibly distressed, telling the technician that a massively expensive failure is entirely their fault because they ignored the quote-unquote obvious warning signs.
They weaponize the bias against themselves. They assume their memory of the past is perfectly accurate, so they must have just been foolish or lazy. How does an experienced technician even begin to navigate that? I mean, it's a massive burden for a person to carry over a household appliance.
It really is. And Dave counters the self-blame by introducing the mechanical reality of the equipment. He relies on a concept he calls the wear-out edge of its bathtub.
Okay, let's clarify what that means.
Yeah.
Because the bathtub curve is a massive concept in engineering and reliability, but it's definitely not something most people picture when they look at their air conditioner.
Right. So if you draw a graph of the failure rate of any mechanical product over time, it looks exactly like the cross-section of a bathtub. On the far left, when the product is brand new, you have a fairly high rate of failure.
From like bad parts out of the box.
Exactly. These are manufacturing defects. The unit was wired wrong at the factory, or a pipe wasn't soldered correctly. That's known as infant mortality.
Okay, and then the curve drops down sharply and stays flat for a very long time. That's the bottom of the tub.
Right. That long, flat bottom is the useful life of the machine. The failure rate is incredibly low and mostly random during that period. But eventually, you reach the far right side of the graph. The curve slopes steeply upward again. That is the wear-out edge.
The point where the cumulative stress of just normal operations simply destroys the materials.
Exactly. After 15 or 18 or 20 years of relentless compressor cycles, enduring extreme heat and cold, the physical metals and electrical windings are exhausted. The machine was always going to fail.
Yeah.
And Dave has to explain to these distressed customers that they did not cause the failure by missing a subtle warning, because the warning was never loud enough to matter. The unit was simply on the steep wear-out edge of its bathtub, and the bathtub does not negotiate with customer vigilance.
So what does this all mean? The bathtub does not care how closely you listen to the fan motor in April. It was going to fail in July regardless. And if we pull this away from HVAC systems for a moment, the implications are staggering.
Oh, yeah.
Because we apply this exact same self-punishing hindsight bias to the most critical areas of our lives, don't we?
We do.
Yes.
Medical outcomes, financial losses, failed relationships.
Right. You picture families sitting in waiting rooms, agonizing over a sudden medical diagnosis, saying, we should have seen the signs sooner. He was a little tired last month. Or an investor losing their savings and thinking, the market warning signs were obvious, I was just too stupid to act. Or someone just agonizing over a brutal breakup, completely convinced they ignored glaring red flags on the very first date.
It's heartbreaking. We carry an immense amount of unnecessary guilt by demanding that our past selves possess the knowledge of our present selves.
We beat ourselves up for missing a prediction that was scientifically, logically, and practically impossible to make at the time. We assume every moment of everyday friction was actually a neon doom signal that we negligently ignored.
Which brings up a very delicate challenge. When someone is spiraling into that self-blaming version of the bias, really doing real emotional harm to themselves, how do you de-escalate it? Like, how does a technician standing in a driveway pull a customer out of that trap?
Well, Dave is extremely clear on what does not work. You do not directly contradict them. You don't look at a distressed homeowner and say, you couldn't have known, or those sounds you heard in the spring weren't actionable.
Even though mechanically and logically, those statements are 100% accurate.
Right. They might be factually accurate, but relationally, they are disastrous. If you tell someone their memory is false or that their intuition is wrong during a highly stressful, expensive moment, you completely undercut them. You strip away their dignity when they're already feeling incredibly vulnerable.
And Dave's approach is just a masterclass in emotional intelligence. He threads a very specific needle here.
Yeah.
He begins by acknowledging their attentiveness without ever ratifying their impossible prediction. He will say something to the effect of, "You were paying attention to your house. You picked up on a change." He validates their perception of the ambient noise. But then he softly introduces the mechanical reality.
He tells them that even with his 47 years of specialized training and a truck full of expert pressure gauges and voltage meters, he could not have stood in their yard in March and predicted the exact month that compressor would fail.
It's such a brilliant pivot. He admits that even the absolute highest level of expertise couldn't make that prediction with certainty. And by doing that, he entirely removes the burden of foresight from the customer. It shatters the conviction that a layperson just living their life, should have successfully predicted a complex mechanical failure.
But this highlights something so vulnerable and almost tragic about human nature.
What's that?
Well, why do we do this? Why did that woman in Dover so desperately need to believe she knew the AC was going to break? Why do we prefer the heavy, suffocating burden of guilt over simply accepting the reality that we are completely powerless against the random chaos of the world?
Because powerlessness is terrifying. An unexpected failure, whether it's an appliance, a job, or a relationship, is an event that violently strips you of control. The homeowner didn't choose for the compressor to fail. The failure was inflicted upon her by the physical universe. This creeping determinism, this whole rewriting of memory, it actually acts as a psychological defense mechanism against that existential dread.
Wow. So by saying I knew it all along, she is subconsciously putting herself back in the driver's seat.
Precisely. It provides retroactive agency. Even if she couldn't stop the failure, she gets to rewrite the narrative so that she was an active participant who saw it coming, rather than just a passive victim of a random mechanical event.
She gets to be someone who was on top of it.
Exactly. We crave control so deeply that we will literally alter our perception of our own history just to maintain the illusion that the world is predictable.
We would rather feel guilty than feel powerless. We will shoulder the blame for a disaster just to avoid admitting that the disaster was entirely out of our hands.
And that is why Dave's resolution is so effective. By respecting her bias, by validating her attentiveness, and letting her keep her retroactive agency, but gently refusing to ratify the impossible prediction, he allows her to process the loss of control safely. She feels heard, she retains her dignity, and she is freed from the unrealistic expectation that she should have altered the future.
And it allows her to move forward. The notes show that she absorbed that reality. She stopped fighting the past and was immediately able to discuss quoting the replacement unit. It's a profound demonstration of how understanding the flaws in our own cognition can actually help us navigate a crisis.
Absolutely.
I mean, we started with the broken air conditioner in Dover, but what we've really explored is the immense pressure we put on our own memories to make sense of a chaotic world.
We've seen how our brains automatically convert the harmless fuzz of daily signals into glaring historical red flags, overriding our past uncertainty just to survive the present.
The real takeaway here for you, listening to this, is to practice a little radical self-compassion the next time something unexpectedly fails in your life. You have to learn to separate your genuine everyday attentiveness from your brain's retroactive promotion of ambient signals. You were probably paying attention to your life, your work, your partner, but you did not have a crystal ball.
Right. You were living in the fuzz of signals, processing millions of pieces of ambient data just like everyone else. The bathtub curve applies to far more than just machinery.
But there's a final thought here that builds on everything we've discussed, and it is something you might want to explore on your own. If our brains so easily and so automatically overwrite our past uncertainty with this creeping determinism just to make us feel safe and in control of our environment, it really forces you to question the integrity of the rest of your memories.
It really does, because how much of your personal history, like the foundational stories you tell yourself about who you are, is actually factual? And how much of it is just a comforting narrative heavily edited by your present self to help you survive the sheer chaos of being alive?
It makes you wonder how much of your identity is just an elaborate coping mechanism. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Dave Hartzell's notes, the mechanics of failure, and the strange rewriting landscape of hindsight bias. We will catch you next time.